Welcome, honored guests. If you're listening, you have landed on a Toastmaster-inspired podcast. I'm your host, Bernie Martin, and I hope to have some interesting conversations with some interesting people. Join us as we deep dive into some of the topics that people are passionate about. I'm so glad you chose to visit with us on Passionate Pursuits. Welcome back. This is episode 2, and we're glad you're joining us. We'd like to introduce you to my guest for this episode. I have with us today April Harper. I met April several years ago through some mutual friends. She was visiting in town and getting to know some folks. April is a missionary with Youth with a Mission, also known as YWAM for those of us who've been in the circle for a little while. She travels all over the world. We're going to talk about science and the Bible. So, April, I'm just going to ask you to introduce yourself a little bit. Why science? Why the Bible? And how did you end up mixing the two together?
What a great question. As Bernie mentioned, I'm a full-time missionary with YWAM. I've always had this bent of a very analytical and a very mathematical mindset. Ever since I was little, I used to really love science and mathematics. And when I became a Christian, I didn't realize that I could be a scientist and a mathematician as a Christian. I felt like I had to choose like another profession or something like this. I love children, and so I learned how to be like a children's minister and work with kids and the homeless and all these other things were great ministries, don't get me wrong. But all the while, I was in the back of my head thinking, hey, there's more, there's more, there's more. In the Gospels, we read that we're to love the Lord our God with all our heart, with all our strength, with all our soul, and with all of our mind. And it's very specific that we're supposed to use and engage our mind. And the Lord used that scripture to really show me that I was to cultivate my science and mathematical gifts to be able to work with Him on the mission field in a different capacity. And I happened to be living and working in Russia at that time. And there were all these children that were coming to us, and they needed to see a doctor. But because of their home lives or the lack of a home, because many of them were homeless children, it was hard to find a doctor who would take them in and look after them. And my heart just broke. And I was like, if only I had the skills of medicine or understood a bit more of what was going on, I could help them. And so with that, the Lord kind of provoked me to go back to university. I went to the University of Georgia and completed a degree in genetics and really learned how to press into the presence of God to discover things that would help the people whom He died for. A few years later, I ended up being back on the mission field, and this time in the nation of Ukraine. And as soon as I got there, I thought, oh, I'll just put all that sciencey stuff to the side, begin working with children again, and then I met one of our international leaders in Youth with a Mission, David Hamilton. And he sat me down and he was like, one of these things just doesn't belong. Can't you use your science giftings within YWAM? That was the first time I had ever thought that I could be both a full-time missionary and someone who truly loved Jesus and use my science gifts. And my heart literally felt like it exploded because I no longer had to oscillate between being this science, math person who loves to do calculus or working with children on the street. Like I could do both. I could bring science onto the mission field.
Which is so unusual because in so much of college campuses and the stories that we hear, we're trained to believe that they don't mix,
Correct.
that they can't mix.
Yeah.
Like if you're a Christian, you're mindless. You don't have the ability to think on your own, you know. To be able to see you live out your life and pursue a dream and a passion that does mix the two together. We want to hear a little bit more about that. So how does science fit with your Christianity?
Well, to me, I couldn't imagine being a scientist without pressing into the presence of the Lord and discovering more from His Word. And I believe that there is such a blending to where God, in that moment of talking with David Hamilton, really merged those two parts of my heart together in a very beautiful way. To where when I read my Bible, often I'll read things I'm just blown away. Like it talks about in the scriptures in the book of Job about the ordinances of heaven. And I have friends who are cartographers, and I'm thinking, wow, cartography, a science of mapping and creating GPS systems and ordinances and actually mapping out coordinate planes. That's even mentioned in the Bible. And you think about how when Adam and Eve were created, before Eve was created, Adam was sent out to name and categorize creation. And that is taxonomy. That is how we define living creatures even till today, is based off of Adam's original intent of naming and defining God's creation. Then you have great scientists of the past that are often overlooked. Like within my field of genetics, the father of genetics is Gregor Mendel, and he was a monk, and he was someone who God stirred. He was a Bible-believing, Christian-loving person who loved Jesus. He wanted to determine why pea plants pass down certain traits. And now anyone who studies genetics, one of the cornerstones of their teaching is the hereditary Mendel square, Punnett square, where you actually learn genetic hereditary traits. And that was discovered by him, and which led to the discovery of DNA with Watson and Crick and of Cambridge, and all these amazing things came after. But it started in a monastery.
Talking about DNA, that will always capture my attention, which is a future episode for one of the things I'm passionate about is the DNA discovery and that research. So we talked a little bit just earlier briefly about Jeremiah 33:3, which happens to be a verse that's important for both of us. And to quote it, it says, "Call unto me, and I will answer you, and show you great and mighty things that you do not know." You've got some additional translation to add to that. Tell me a little bit about this Jeremiah 33:3.
If you study into different context of different words in that scripture, it talks about come, seek me, much like a deer who's famished, needing to seek after the water. That's how earnestly we're called to seek after the Lord in this. And the beauty is that He will answer us, but not just answer us with a binary yes or no question, but it says to show you great and mighty things, hidden, fenced in treasures that the world has yet to discover.
That's good. That's good.
And to me, that really defines the heart of a scientist, because you're wanting to dig, you're wanting to discover fenced in, hidden gems that the world has yet to discover. And if you mirror that with the scripture in Hebrews that says, "Come boldly before the throne of grace," because of the cross of Christ, I now have access to the throne room of God. so that I can call to him and he can show me those great and mighty things that the world has yet to discover. So these are the things I dream about. Like, I'm currently working in the nation of Papua New Guinea, one of the places that I work worldwide. And they have a huge problem with tuberculosis, as well as leprosy and other diseases that have been around for ages. But what if God would like to reveal a hidden treasure, a gem, that would unlock a quicker pathway of healing? Because right now this bacteria is so obtuse and so strong, you have to be on medicine from anywhere from 6 months to several years to get better, depending on the ailment. And yet, what if we could design a different way to attack it, to where within 14 to 20 days, like a normal sinus infection, it would be cleared up? How would that change the world? How much life could we give to so many people who are struggling with these types of diseases? That's like a hidden treasure that I would love to discover with God.
I believe it's possible.
Yes.
And with that study and that research and him revealing the mysteries of heaven, which I think it's so easy sometimes for us to put him in a box, to put God in a box. But when you think about even creation itself and how he spoke the world into existence with just his word, and how much more he has yet to reveal in that moment. It's hard to put all of this into a nugget time frame, but unfortunately our time is up for this segment. But thank you, April, for your time.
My pleasure.
As you return to the bush, I wish you well and Godspeed.
Thank you, my friend.
Thank you.